us the storm. Aha, we are warm and we have a heart's desire. But here we got fellows and the beechwood and the bellows and the cappies and the lips in the pledge of fellowship. Oh, here by the byway, by
A winter's Sunday morning. From the valley beyond the hill, they make the slow climb over the crest, the Treharris Male Choir. They're going on a visit to the neighboring valley to meet its singers, the Aber Valley Male Voice Choir. Down there, they will sing to each other. They will sing together. At the head of this valley, closed in by the hills, is Senghenydd, the home of the Aber Choir. A self-contained community because of its geography and its social pattern. 5,000 people, a main street, a clock tower in the square, 7 rugby teams for men and boys, 14 chapels. Senghenydd lies grey upon the green. A stream rises on the hill, runs across the village and down the valley, the 2 miles of it, to join the Aber River. "60 or 70 years ago, Senghenydd knew a certain prosperity stemming from a colliery which is now no more. Today, the wastewater from another mine, the Windsor Colliery, pours into the river. Windsor gives employment to the valley, 2/3 of the Aber Choir here. But even a mine stands resting on a Sunday. Now we are 2 Sundays back in time, a fortnight before the 2 choirs are to meet. The top room at the ex-servicemen's club still holds the debris of Saturday night's bingo session. The Aber Choir gets ready for the occasion. The Aber Valley Male Voice Choir was formed only 5 years ago, but it follows a long tradition of choir singing in the valley. By 11 o'clock, when the second service is beginning in the chapels, most of the 70 members are come together. Minors, most of them. There is no quibble about giving up a rest day. Choir practice twice a week is a labor of love. Number 35, second tenor, Don Jenkins, Collier. Number 72, first tenor, Danny Williams, retired railway fitter. Number 61, second tenor, Bill Pratt, colliery banksman. Stan Evans is one of the 4 Evans brothers in the choir, 3 singing parts and the conductor. Though there is a certain self-imposed discipline, the Aber Choir is more of a family affair. There are 5 pairs of father and son, like David Jones and his father Frank. 5 years ago, Frank started singing, as his son does today, as first tenor. And as his voice sank down through the registers, he had to relearn his score so often that he spent his free moments in the mine practicing. The conductor, Di John Evans, unofficial music director of Senghenydd. The choice of their first song is significant. It sets the mood for the whole Sunday rehearsal. Most of the songs come from the broad elements of the Christian story. Babylon's waves, martyrs of the arena, crossing the plain. The voices can ride out, or they can turn to quiet lyrical pastorals about the still of the night or the singing of the birds. This morning song is a classic. Udelin Air by Pugh Evans, about the golden harp that plays an unceasing accompaniment to the eternal life in the kingdom of God.
Better now. What more expression on a duet? Leave it to There is no end to this. To the sound of the golden harp. There's no end to remembrance. We sing about these people that have gone on before us, and they're still singing. I hope you'll be singing when we get there. Some of you. Shall we? Ni bir duer, ni bir duer. It's not sooner, Jill and I, right? Ni, get ready for space. Half a beat, get ready, 1, 2, and then...
The faces of the master singers. The faces of colliers, newsagents, lathe operators, bus conductors. Men making music. What is the invisible bond that brings them together, week by week, year after year, in each and every valley? Where are the roots of their song? In the past? In the present? Are they social? Religious? Why do they sing?
Hold it out. From the beginning. Let's have it in so far. Right? Get ready. Give me the chord, Lynn.
The accompanist, Lynn Williams, can give us one answer, or many. He teaches and was the natural choice. By midday, when people are gathering in the club downstairs, the choir is well into rehearsal of the second verse of the Golden Harp.
Now, this is what I want to try to, the end of the second verse. Can mal do and even heart, can mal do and even heart. God's house. Right, in God's house, that's what it is. The very first bit, nice mellow tone. 1, 2.
For the past 50 years, the tubs have brought up the stones separated from the coal. The continuous chain of colliery tips has arisen above the village. Peaked black hills on top of the green and grey. John Evans, the conductor, is in charge of maintenance of the ropeway. Twice a week he leaves his workshop for a tour of inspection. The main tower is 180 feet high. It is one of Dai's recurrent dreams that he stands on top of the tower and from there conducts a combined choir of all the male voices in Wales. At the gateway to the valley, the Norman castle of Caerphilly. Up to 100 years ago, the whole valley served the castle as a deer park. Green and pleasant, stocked with squirrels and salmon. And then in 1892, men came out of the towns and set to work at Senghenydd. For a long time, coal had been suspected beneath the green fields. The men were hard and tough. They came to sink a shaft. They found coal. And within a few years, by 1900, the Universal Colliery had been built at the top of the valley. Senghenydd saw the feverish progress of a coal rush. Another mine was sunk, Windsor, and a railway line was built. And from across the ridge where the Treharris choir came that Sunday morning in 1965, came people from other valleys to find a new place to settle, to chance their luck. It was an invasion. A township grew out of it, and people made it their home. All the streets led towards the pit. And the pit gave them a livelihood at an average wage of 4 shillings and 9 pence a shift. "60 years ago, Senghenydd was a boomtown, a Welsh Klondike. There were shops full of goods, there were coffee houses, pawnbrokers, midwives. A telegraph office was opened, and there were 3 policemen. The railway opened its service to passengers. Or you could take a coach to Caerphilly and see the visit of Edward VII and his queen. One after the other, hotels were built to cater for the traveling salesman, the bagman, and the show people. Over their drinks, folks made up stories about the local characters. The garden parties, the debates, the sports, and the choirs were organized by the chapels. One after the other, they went up. 7 on the main street alone. All this within 10 years. The small chapel was the first to be built, but only 3 years later the church beside it had to go up to make room for the growing congregation. In their oratories, the people gathered to enjoy each other's company around the stove, to listen to the famous traveling preachers of the times like Evan Roberts, whose sermons, full of cataclysmic visions and earth-shattering punishment, made tough miners accept Christ in tears and persuaded entire rugby teams to give up the game. It was here that people sought comfort when early disaster struck Universal Colliery. Today, not much has survived of that tradition of church-going, of the days of vast congregations and great sermons. Many of these ladies sat in the same pews when the valley was young, 50 years ago. But the devotion and the fervor are still the same as in the olden days. This is why John Evans, conductor of the choir, likes to play the organ in chapel. To such religious roots, choir singing in the valley owes allegiance. Gradually, the choirs outgrew the wings of the church and were caught up in the mainstream of social development. The places and the circumstances where men sing today may be a far cry from the chapel, but the essence, the mystery, and the purpose of singing are still the same. The spirit that seems to descend on Welshmen when they're in a crowd. Who can tell the moment when a natural delight, an inborn gift to make music, turns into a form of art? So to the Sunday afternoon performance of the Aber Choir in the school hall. The listeners are stern judges, the men from Treharris. Ted Hilborn, the Treharris choirmaster, usually turns up at rehearsal at the last moment. He may have come from his confectionery shop or from the church where he too has played the organ for the past 32 years.
Right, good evening, gentlemen. We'll start tonight, I think, with Psalm of Life. Doubtless you'll realize that we don't know this as perfectly as we might, so we'll concentrate on the most difficult part, I think, not the part that you know well.
Treharris rehearsals are more formal than those of the Aber Choir. There are more than 90 members, most of them middle-aged. They have a reputation in South Wales. They broadcast and have recorded.
All righty then.
The song they are preparing for their meeting with the Aber Choir is a technical tour de force, a setting by Haydn Morris of a poem by Longfellow. It is about the purpose of life and the interdependence of human beings. There are regular guests at the rehearsal, pensioners whose organisation lends the hall. Ted Hilborn will warm up gradually. By the end of the rehearsal, he is usually in his shirt sleeves.
Not got the right impression of it all. We've not got enough mystery here, have we? Still like muffled drums. It's a wonderful phrase, isn't it? Muffled drums. So now, a little more drama about this, I think. Right? Still like muffled drums, still like muffled drums, still like muffled drums, still like muffled drums, funeral marches to the grave. In the world of field of battle, in the big war of life, we not fight and brave and cattle. Be a hero, be a hero, be a hero in the strife. Stroke your, stroke I don't think you're giving me all you can there. Where you have a note that you can do something with, well, let's do something with it, isn't it? You're singing it like this. Act in the living present, act in the... Now, you don't sound to me as if you're going to act in anything at all. It's a shame to have to tell the bottom basses that the best section in the choir without any doubt at all.
little on these nasty vowels, right? Goodness knows this is modern music and it's hard enough to sing anyway. And excitement and work this thing up a little bit, right? Shall we go once to standing this time, and then you'll feel it a bit better.
When you stand in the middle of a choir and sing, you can feel the people around you. You know that they are there, beside you, in front of you, behind you. They are people whom you can count on, people with whom you share something in common. People who make your single voice part of an entity. You feel together that you are doing something well. The mine, where all the roads lead. Don Jenkins, second tenor in the Arbor Choir, is on day shift at Windsor Colliery. Five years ago, Don signed on at the pit and the choir the same day. You leave your clean clothes on one side. The baths are the frontier between the outside world and the mine. On the other side, in the locker, are your working clothes. Now you are already in the pit. There is the feeling of being down below. Five mornings a week, Don Jenkins goes down into the earth 600 yards. It is a crisp, steely winter's morning. The night shift is up. It has prepared the faces for the coaling shift. And after that will come the afternoon shift, day by day, night by night. In the lamp room, the changing of the guard takes place when the two shifts mingle. One comes back into daylight with an exhausted lamp. The other will carry a fresh source of light into the dark. They are both expectant, the men and the pit. They await their meeting. The noises of the mine, harsh and chaotic. A choir of sound, if you like, but rough, inharmonious. And for a moment, the men are the audience before playing the part in it. When it comes to Sunday rehearsal, they will not sing about the mine and their work. Their pastoral of a quiet summer evening will be a kind of escape, a rejection of these noises. At the pit top, the last cigarette. The mood is one of quiet expectation, the same as the silence before the choir begins a song. And now the descent. At 7 o'clock every morning, Don says his farewell to the world of daylight. As you walk down here, you can feel the people around you. You know that the others are there behind you, in front of you. People you can count on. People who make you part of another entity. And 600 yards above the network of underground roadways stands the Eglwysyllan Church on the hilltop, more than 700 years old. It used to be the mother church of the whole district. Directly below the cemetery, men are working on the coalface. There are tombstones that date back centuries, and stones that mark a certain black October morning. On Tuesday, 14th October 1913, at 8:10 in the morning, a devastating explosion tore apart the Universal Colliery. It was the greatest disaster in the annals of British mining. It happened 1,700 feet underground, but even the shaft on the surface was wrecked. In only a few minutes, the local people had crowded the colliery yard. Edward Shaw, the manager, took charge of operations. But the pit canaries sent down the shattered shaft to check for gas died before it reached pit bottom. The fire raged on for days. Universal Colliery became a furnace. Senghenydd waited in silence. The hillside by the pit was crowded with people. 40,000 came up the valley. They waited for news of their fathers, their sons, their husbands and brothers. As soon as they could, and breathing oxygen, a rescue team went down into the pit. But against the raging fire, there was little they could do. They came up, and with them they began to bring the first victims. They were brought up one after the other. 439 dead miners in all. It was a national disaster. Families had lost all their menfolk. 62 parents lost their sons. There were 205 widows, 545 fatherless children. In Senghenydd, there was a victim in every house. One house mourned 8 men, father, son, brothers, lodgers. The victims were honored with a military funeral. So only 10 or 15 years after the boom, Senghenydd had lost almost half its breadwinners. The question was, how could the survivors survive, whether life in the village would not die out? Soon there were more blows to come. In the same square where the mourners passed, they inaugurated only a few years later a stone to the memory of a further 62 men. The choir sang at this ceremony too. Young tenors who had seen the war through came back to sing. Then came the years of the Depression. In 1928, Universal Colliery was closed down. The choir went to London to sing in the streets and to send back money to their families in need. As the years have passed, the scene of the tragedy has become deserted. The lucky horseshoe is still there on the engine room door. The ill-fated pit canary, now stuffed, is an ornament in a guest room in a house in Caerphilly. In 1964, the railway was closed to passengers. Half the track was taken up. The station buildings were demolished. The ruins of Universal Colliery had been dynamited and razed. To the people of Senghenydd, the deserted pit head was best out of the way. Today, this is all that is left of Universal. A sawmill took over the site. The sounds of its work carry as far as the village. This village and this valley have survived against odds that seemed overwhelming. But they survived. And they survived singing.
Yes, there's no end to the singing, that is there. No end to the singing. The sound of the golden harp. Sing it a little louder, right? Double 40. There were the Connie. Lovely bass there. Wonderful note there with a bottom bass coming right up. Second tenor, sing it so fast, right? Second tenor, so fast. Get ready, chord again. 1, 2. La, la.